necessarily in financial trouble to begin with. I was all for helping the American people out, and I still am. But I never agreed with the fact that we need to be recklessly printing money to help out people who might want to decide to buy a third BMW this year. That is not what the
said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
As the George Floyd trial gets ready to kick off in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the entire world is watching. Many would even argue that this is by far the trial of the century. It dwarfs the O.J. Simpson case, which for many of you may have remembered while growing up. Minneapolis is scared to death of what's going to happen either way, whether George Floyd's murder is justified or not. They feel like it's already a losing battle, and I'll explain why in just a second. But these are very scary times that we live in. The black community is obviously very upset for what's happened. They don't feel like justice has been served. And the Breonna Taylor case, the David Perdue case here in Rochester, New York, and other cases around the country, these officers have gotten off, and rightly so, because the procedures the entire time have allowed them to act the way that they did. There's a serious problem, as we all know, with how police, men and women, are behaving, but it doesn't negate the fact that they all behaved legally. They all had the right to do what they did. And I have a very strong feeling that Derek Chauvin is going to join the long list of cops who are going to get off once again, because again, the procedure allowed the cop to do what they did in the first place, which is why I have never been more scared in my life of what we're about to see over in Minneapolis. But what's worse about this whole thing is that as we get ready for the George Floyd trial, as we get ready to go up against Derek Chauvin, the cop who kneeled on the neck of George Floyd and ultimately, and many would argue, caused his death. It's still debatable. But what's worse about this is that the judge in Minnesota just reinstated the third-degree murder charge, essentially setting up America for a catastrophic failure. And I'll let Newsmax explain exactly what I mean. Let's get into the show, and we'll hear what journalists and political analysts have to say about the fact that the judge has just reinstated third-degree murder charge, possibly setting the bar a little bit too high and setting America up for failure. Let's take a look. So, as we can see here over at Newsmax, Dave Rubin says, unless there is a full conviction in the Derek Chauvin case, there's going to be massive riots. There's no doubt about it. I mean, get ready, America. There's going to be rioting. I'll tell you right now, because not only do I think Derek Chauvin is going to get off, but even if he does get convicted, I do not think it's going to be the over third-degree murder that the judge has just reinstated. That judge has just set this country up for failure. He set this country up for massive riots, and I'll let the guys over at Newsmax explain why.
A legal case, and I would say a cultural case. So we've just dissected the legal case, and the fact that they're going for this third-degree murder charge, I think, is setting up what will become the cultural case, which is fairly obvious that unless he gets a full conviction on all accounts, there is going to be massive riots. Like that to me is a far gone conclusion. To the idea that we allow certain people to select certain areas in certain cities where police can no longer go, and the laws of the United States or of that particular state or city no longer apply, is already a concession that is so extraordinary that, of course, what the people want, what the Antifa people, the Black Lives Matter people, and I would say a lot of the progressive politicians, including Keith Ellison, and this is a really dangerous idea, that they want more unrest. Mm-hmm. So I think he's intentionally going with this high charge, and short of a full conviction, and I think whatever that means, even if there was a full conviction, they would still find a way to go ahead with the violence they have planned, because that's part of the battle right now. It's not just a legal battle, it's a cultural battle.
Yeah. That's why there should be a change of venue. This case should not be tried in a large city in Minnesota. This case should be tried in a rural area where there is no personal fear that there will be danger or repercussions, because the last thing you want any juror to think is, I don't want my family hurt. And if I come and vote for an acquittal, this could affect me and my family and my community. Whereas if I vote to convict, everybody's going to be safe, everybody's going to be fine. That cannot affect a juror's perception if the Constitution is to be followed. And so a change of venue, I don't know whether they're thinking about anonymous jurors in this case. That happens in some cases. There are lots of techniques that can be used to reduce the prejudicial impact. Because look, this is the most important crime, put aside capital, whether, all that, but the most important murder in modern memory. No murder, no killing, let's use the word killing and be neutral, no death of a person has ever singularly produced more change, not only in Minnesota, not only in the United States, but around the world. The death of this man changed what's going on around the world. It is a major cultural, political, historical event. And for a judge to ignore that would be to abdicate his responsibility. He has to assure justice under circumstances where it's going to be very difficult to get justice done here.
In both a micro and
John,
macro
can I
sense.
just say one other thing?
One more thing, David, and I'll let you talk. One more on a micro and macro sense too. Here, they called for defunding the police as a result of this, and right now the Hennepin County Courthouse is surrounded by National Guard and surrounded by razor wire, and this is the effect that happens. They want to defund the police, but what you get in return is the National Guard to fill the void. Dave, go ahead.
Well, because of what Professor Dershowitz just said there, that's the point, that if they had gone for the first degree and second degree, virtually everybody across the political spectrum and all over the world would have said justice was done here if he was convicted of those two things. But now by taking this leap, they're setting us up for further destruction. They're setting us up for further upheaval and everything else. And that really is the danger here. And again, I kind of think that that's sort of what Keith Ellison, as the Attorney General, wants, that he is setting us up for that situation. Otherwise, perhaps he would be doing his job and they would be going into that autonomous zone and closing it right now. Why is it open?
Because the only reason it's open is because it's politically unpopular to close it down. That's the only conclusion we can reach here.
So as you can see here, we have a very, very serious issue on our hands. And I do feel like Black Lives Matter is holding this case hostage. I'm going to come out and say it. I think we are being held hostage. America is being held hostage right now because either one or two things are going to happen. Either justice is going to lose because they're scared to death of the riots that are going to occur if Derek Chauvin does not get convicted to the fullest extent, which I don't think is going to happen. I think if you convict very fairly, if the juror comes out with a very fair conviction, it's actually not going to be to convict at all. It's going to be to acquit him. Because you have to remember, look at what happened here. The Minneapolis Police Department allowed a chokehold or a knee to the neck. They allowed it. And Derek Chauvin knew it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sitting there smiling at the camera the whole time. And I've been screaming about this from the very beginning. I've said he is 100% getting off. Every single cop has got off so far because they were all within their rights. Breonna Taylor, look at Daniel in Rochester, New York. They all got off because they were allowed to implement or exercise the various chokeholds or the measures that they used to restrain these criminals and convicts. So you can argue all day long until you're blue in the face that it was immoral, that it was unethical, but you can't argue that it was illegal, because it was absolutely legal. Derek Chauvin, although morally he may be guilty, perhaps he didn't have to kneel on the neck. Again, that's not for me to say. That's not even for you to say. That's definitely not for Black Lives Matter to say, because we are not cops. A cop might be able to weigh in and tell us whether they think Derek Chauvin was within his moral rights to be able to do that, because they're the ones who put their lives in danger every single day. We do not. So it's not up to us to tell us whether Derek Chauvin should have been kneeling on the neck. Yes, George Floyd was in handcuffs, so one might argue it probably wasn't necessary. But again, that's not for you and I to decide. So we're screwed. America is screwed right now, because Black Lives Matter is going to hold this country hostage, because they are going to threaten to burn this country to the ground if Derek Chauvin is not convicted to the full extent. Third-degree murder, which he should not be. And I think you'll find that any lawyer is going to agree with me on this because of what happened leading up to this event. So is he going to get a full conviction? If the jury chooses fairly, no, he won't. And I think it's very stupid that the judge has actually reinstated third-degree murder, because he set this country up for failure. I opened the show with that. And the reason is because even if he doesn't get third-degree murder and they drop the charge to something lesser, it's still not going to be good enough for the black community. They're still going to be outraged. They should have kept the charge at a much lesser charge than third-degree murder. They should not have raised the bar so high. And I know what they're doing. I know what they're trying to do. Let's go for the maximum penalty we can go for. And if we can't get the juror to go for that, well, at least we'll step down and we'll get something which is better than an acquittal. But what they don't realize is that Black Lives Matter is going to be pissed if he gets anything but third-degree murder. And they couldn't go for something lesser, because if you step down from the lesser charge, you're looking at now an acquittal, which again is going to set a bomb off in this country. The jurors alone are scared to death. Let's talk about the jurors. How is a juror supposed to vote fairly on this when they know if they vote for an acquittal or if they vote for not guilty, that their lives are in danger? You have to remember, these jurors are from the Minneapolis area. And if the word gets out that they voted not guilty, their lives are in danger. Their families' lives are in danger. There are autonomous zones being set up right now, and they aren't being shut down. That is how scared the local police are, the local law enforcement are, and all the residents of Minneapolis. And as we just heard over on Newsmax, they even said this case should not be tried in such a large city. It should be sent out to a rural area. Because as soon as Derek Chauvin gets off, it's going to set the entire city on fire. It's going to bring the entire thing down. So America is just screwed right now. Either way, either the justice system gets taken down with an unfair trial because people are scared to death or feel like they're being held hostage to Black Lives Matter, or we convict to the full extent and justice is not prevailed, or Black Lives Matter riots. Those are our only two options. Either justice loses or the city of Minneapolis loses. Let's over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam and see what the American people have to say about the very dangerous and potentially life-threatening situation that's occurring right in their own backyard in Minneapolis. So the judge, as we know, the judge reinstates third-degree murder. The judge is going or allowing prosecutors to go for the highest charge here. Mistake number one. Horrible idea. Because if Chauvin doesn't get convicted and a guilty charge is thrown at him and he gets let off because that's not really the charge that's appropriate for the case in the first place, it's going to infuriate the entire country. The black community will absolutely lose it. There will be no yard signs and flags this time. They won't care. There will be no rah-rah singing kumbaya and lighting candles. There will be no raising money. They won't care about any of that. You won't see Kamala Harris by their side this time. You will not see Bernie Sanders or Pelosi. It is going to be Black Lives Matter, the black community, completely on their own, and they will do whatever they feel is necessary to argue their case. Gloria says, so what if they riot? They have been doing it all year. Floyd should have done what the cops said instead of resisting. Sorry, but I have no sympathy for anybody who resists arrests. Do what they say and plead your case in court. Again, George Floyd resisted arrest. He swallowed a ridiculous amount of fentanyl and then overdosed. There's no disputing the fact that he overdosed. There is disputing the fact whether Chauvin's knee cut off his air supply. And even if he did, there's no disputing the fact that he was allowed to restrain him in that capacity because the procedure allowed it. So I don't even know what we're even trying here. I mean, come on. I know the black community's pissed off. I know what we saw was totally unjust. But listen, guys, I'm sorry. I have seen a tremendous amount of time. I have looked at videos of white people being shot unjustly. I've seen videos of teenagers drunk go to reach for their wallet, white teenagers, and get shot to death by a white cop. If you go on YouTube and you search white cop kills white suspect, you're going to find a million videos and you're not going to believe what you see. It's disgusting, some of the killings that have occurred. So it's not just white cops on black suspects. You're going to find any combination and a ridiculous number of those combinations if you just do a simple YouTube search. But have they? Have the black community actually done that? Or have they just gone based off the narrative that the left and the Democrats continue to push? Which is disgusting, by the way, and it's ripped this country apart. But my white liberal friends don't know that because all they see is yard signs around their neighborhood. And they feel better about themselves for hanging a flag in their doorway or their window. And that's pretty much as far as they go with it because they don't take it upon themselves to really dig deep and look at what's happening in Chicago and Minneapolis. And I spoke about Black Lives Matter on yesterday's show. We spoke another show about how Kamala and the Democratic Party are nowhere to be seen. They got their votes. They're done. You better believe they're not stepping into this one. No chance. So I'll be very curious to see what all my friends now think of Black Lives Matter after the Democratic Party isn't behind them on this next round of rioting. Let's go back to the keyboard warrior cam and see what other American people have to say about the fact that this case is getting heated up and Black Lives Matter is getting ready to hold the country hostage. Richard says the mob always gets what it wants. That's how it works now. No law enforcement. They know what threats and violence pays off. Making the jury names public was just the first of many mistakes. Exactly. Why do we make the jury's names public? That's insane. Their lives are now all in danger here. You can't expect the jury to do what's right for justice when they're scared to death of their lives and their families' lives. If I was on that jury, are you kidding me? I wouldn't be able to think fairly. I wouldn't be able to really put on my legal juror hat and keep emotions aside. Because this case is 100% full of emotion right now. Because if the word gets out that I don't vote guilty at whatever charge is thrown at Chauvin, in this case, third-degree murder, I'd be scared for my son's life. How is that fair? So releasing the jury names, you're doing that on purpose as a prosecutor. You are putting these juries' lives in danger. You are holding them hostage now to a guilty verdict. That's exactly what they're doing. The judge bumping it up to third degree was a horrible mistake. Juries' names being made public, horrible mistake. Because no one is going to be able to judge this case fairly without a tremendous amount of emotion being attached to it. Laura says this has gotten so completely out of hand. No reasoning at all. I'm not condoning what happened, but evidently there appears to be more than one side to the story. But of course, a cop, White, did this, and regardless of what killed him, it was the cop's fault. It has gotten out of hand. It's completely out of hand. Linda says he should not have kept his knee on Floyd's neck. There were 4 cops to pick him up and put him in the police car. Sorry, but they deserve to get fired, and Chauvin deserves to be in prison. Just my opinion. See, again, that's where I disagree. Yeah, maybe fired. Again, ethically, morally, was the whole thing wrong? Of course. But I don't know that he deserves to be convicted. It's very simple. It's black and white. Did he deserve it? Does he deserve a conviction? Was he allowed to execute the chokehold? So we've got juries now, juror names who are now going to be made public. George Floyd is being tried at the highest charge, third-degree murder, at least the highest charge for this specific case. They've gone with third-degree murder. The judge has reinstated that. Horrible mistake. Why are autonomous zones being allowed in Minneapolis? When is law enforcement going to take back our cities? When are we going to start defending the police again instead of defunding the police? This is getting out of hand. So now every single city that Black Lives Matter wants to go dominate and ride in, the cops are going to say, you know what, the hell with this shit. We're out of here. We quit. We don't need to risk our lives for this garbage. Is that really what we want? Do we want cities around the world to be held hostage every time a white cop kills a black person? Is that really the direction that America wants to head? Because it's a very dangerous route. I mean, look, we've seen it time and time again. We've seen defund the police rallies get in trouble where those very same people have called the cops. We need cops. It's that simple. And we need criminals to stop resisting arrest. That should be the moral of the story here. Yes, in this specific situation, you've got a white cop killing a black suspect and a criminal suspect, by the way. There's no doubting that. I mean, with a rap sheet a mile long, George Floyd holds up pregnant people. I mean, this guy's an absolute freaking animal and a criminal, and I have no sympathy whatsoever for him. And to name a bill after him, which the Democrats have done, some George Floyd peace whatever bill, is total joke. And the fact that Black Lives Matter is up for a Nobel Peace Prize is even more of a joke. But we do live in a world of insanity right now, run by the radical far left progressive Democrats. So I'm not surprised. None of this is surprising to me anymore. America is being held hostage. That's what's happening. Our law enforcement is scared. Our government is scared. The residents are scared. Everybody is scared to death right now of making the wrong decision. So they end up making no decision at all, or an unjust decision, which is what's going to happen here. You know, a few weeks ago, if you asked me, is Derek Chauvin getting off? I would have said, absolutely. It's not even debatable. He's 100% getting off. Now I'm actually starting to change my tune, not because I think he's guilty, but because I think the jury is so scared of convicting him that they may actually just ignore the justice system altogether and decide to go with the guilty verdict. Because you'd rather the legal system be upset with you than the Black Lives Matter mob. And that's exactly what they are. They're just a mob. They're gangs. It's a thug. It's turned into thug mentality. And if they don't get their way, they're going to riot. So they keep talking about peace. we're a peaceful group. There's nothing peaceful about that group right now. They are straight up violent, and they are going to destroy cities. We're going to see round 2 of BLM all over again. I'm telling you right now. Because if the jurors do their job properly, Derek Chauvin is going to get off. He's going to get off. Black Lives Matter are going to storm America, city by city, bringing it to its knees. And they are going to believe themselves that it was 100% justified. I mean, you talk about the insurrection. Let's talk about that for a second. There are thousands of people who 100% felt that that was justified, that they were supporting their cause. What was their cause exactly? To go up against what they believed to be a fraudulent election, to go up against the fact that they were silenced, that they didn't have their fair day in court. They were speaking out for freedom of speech. They had a reason to believe that they were defending their cause. And all I've seen from the media and the Biden administration is shaming these people, making or painting them to be monsters. Well, how is Black Lives Matter any different than the insurrection? Because the insurrection had a cause, if you really want to call it an insurrection, because it was really a whole 5 seconds of violence, to be honest, out of a very peaceful day. Out of the hundreds of Trump rallies, one day turned violent. One day. And a very small group of extremists, mind you. You can't say the same thing for Black Lives Matter. They rioted, tore down statues, burned down buildings, beat old couples over the head with 2x4s, shot a security guard dead in the street, and never apologized for any of it. None of it. And we're about to see it again if Derek Chauvin gets off. Let's head back over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam, and we'll see what the other American people have to say about the situation, the fact that the judge over the George Floyd case has reinstated the third-degree murder charge, and many would argue, horrible mistake. He's setting this country up for failure. We're either going to lose in court, justice, we're going to lose, or justice is going to lose, or America is going to lose to the riots. So either way, it's a lose-lose situation. We are in big trouble here, people. Linda says murder charges all have definitions, and he has to be tried on what fits those definitions. You can't just say you want it to be first-degree murder, for instance. It would have to meet the definition. Hence the reason he's not being charged with first-degree murder. Is third-degree murder even the right charge? I'd love to know if there's any lawyers watching the show. I'd love to know what you guys think. Is third-degree murder even the right charge? Because it was off the table. The judge only just reinstated it. So at some point, prosecutors didn't think it was worth going for. Now all of a sudden, they feel it's worth going for. Why? Is it because Black Lives Matter got in their ear? Is it because they put pressure on them? Because the last I knew, we didn't let a violent mob dictate the charges that are brought upon a cop. The last time I checked, that was the responsibility of the prosecutors to decide, maybe with the judges, or at least a sidebar conversation as to what charges were appropriate. But it's not up to an activist group, and it's certainly not up to a group of violent individuals to dictate the direction a case goes down. Mike says, why have a trial if the court of public opinion is going to threaten violence if they don't get their way? I do not see how we can be convicted if the medical examiner had ruled his death was due to narcotics ingestion. I mean, that's the deal, guys. We've already ruled the fact that he died from an overdose. That's what happened. You can't say, well, yeah, but maybe he also died of suffocation. Well, no. It's very simple. The medical examiner ruled his death being due to an overdose. He had an incredible amount of fentanyl in him. So that's what George Floyd died of. And we don't know how much pressure Derek Chauvin was really applying. Only Derek Chauvin can answer that. Maybe we'll hear from him in court. I don't know if he's actually speaking at this point. But the fact of the matter is that George Floyd died of an overdose. So you got to take off your emotional hat for a second. And it doesn't make me a monster for thinking this. It doesn't make you a monster for looking at the facts and thinking Derek Chauvin shouldn't be tried with third-degree murder. He should have been fired, yeah. Does there need to be police reform? Absolutely. I don't think it was appropriate what he did. But at the same time, I'm not a cop. So I can't sit here and really voice my opinion fairly. It's not right for me to do that because only cops who put their lives in danger every day are the ones who we really should be listening to as far as why they exercise certain procedures at any given time. Those are the men and women we should really be listening to. Haley says he is innocent. The law book for that area stands. The knee on neck is totally acceptable action. And funny enough, it was written by a black man. I didn't know that. The actual law, the knee on the neck, was written by a black man. I'll have to check that out. He's asked to be put on the floor, and he was stating he can't breathe long before his death. Also, the autopsy shows he did not die from the knee on the neck. Case closed. What are we doing? Why are we even in court? The cop should walk free, but will be sacrificed to keep the peace. See, that is where I'm so angry over the fact that there's a very good chance that Derek Chauvin is going to be sacrificed in order to keep the Black Lives Matter mob at bay. How is that right? What kind of message is this sending America right now? I don't care what the narrative is. Justice needs to be had here. Justice needs to prevail. And if that means Derek Chauvin walks because this isn't the appropriate charge for the case, then that's justice prevailing. And we need to really think about the fact that this is a very dangerous situation that we find ourselves in, being held hostage to Black Lives Matter. On one hand, we're asking the juror to do their job and to vote in an unbiased way. But how are they able to do that when they're scared for their lives? That if they convict Derek Chauvin, that their own life might be in danger, that their family's life might be in grave danger. Kenny says all 12 jurors are not going to convict on first or second degree murder once the evidence of the lethal dose of fentanyl and other drugs in his system are shown. So get ready for that. May get some kind of third degree or manslaughter. Riots will follow. Riots will absolutely follow. Because even if he doesn't get third degree murder and he gets a different charge, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good enough for the black community. They're going to be outraged either way. This is a lose-lose situation. And that's why the entire country needs to get ready for the next round of riots. Brenda says, and Brenda agrees, the way I see it, there will be riots regardless. And moving the trial is only going to inflict damages on innocent people in an innocent location. Having this trial in downtown Minneapolis is the worst thing they can do for that city. That city is going to be destroyed. There's autonomous zones set up right now. And no one's doing anything about it. They're not asking them to leave. You've got armed men guarding these unautonomous zones. And the authorities aren't doing anything about it. And why should they? Why do they want to get involved? I mean, guys, you have to remember, these people have children to go home to. These policemen and women are law enforcement agencies. They've got people to go home for. So when you're sitting there screaming, defund the police, do you actually think about the fact that these police men and women who risk their lives every single day, do you actually consider the fact that they have children to go home to? That they may go to work that day and never see their spouse again, or their child again, or their parents again? When we're screaming to defund the police and take away their tools and resources that they need to keep themselves out of danger, do we consider any of this? Or do we just scream defund the police because that's what your neighbors are doing and you don't want to feel left out in the pity party or the self-righteous bandwagon parade that everybody's on these days? Is that really why you're doing it? Are you doing it because you honestly feel like we should defund the police? Or are you doing it because you want to give yourself a pat on the back because you're doing the right thing for Black Lives Matter, a peaceful cause? Peaceful. It's the farthest thing from peaceful right now. A group who threatens to riot and destroy America if Chauvin is convicted or is acquitted. A group that riots and threatens and says, get ready, we're going to destroy this country if he's let off. That's not a peaceful group. That is anything but peaceful. Maya says, I'm so glad the investigator, Nancy, is protected by fences and razor wire and a National Guard. Speaking about Pelosi. So Maya says, I'm so glad that the instigator, which she is, Nancy Pelosi completely instigated this. Kamala Harris instigated this. Everybody instigated this. Remember, those who sat there and promoted violence and rioting all summer long are now hiding behind fences and razor wire and the National Guard. Her home has bodyguards and walls. Is she worried about the riots? Just saying. Of course they're not. Kamala Harris is in the White House right now. No one's getting to her. She's got the Secret Service and an army to protect her. Nancy Pelosi literally has the National Guard right now protecting her. Chuck Schumer, AOC, they'll all be just fine. They'll have bodyguards assigned to them all summer long during these riots. But people like you and me who are left to fend for ourselves, we're screwed. We have to hope and pray that our families won't be attacked amongst all this chaos. Anybody who lives near a city needs to now watch their back. Every single time a white cop shoots a black suspect, we're always going to be wondering when the next riot's going to be. Even though white cops kill white people all the time. But we don't see that in the media, do we? We don't see that being peddled by the Democrats. No. We only see or hear about the story that sells. A white cop killing a white suspect doesn't sell. Breaking news, people. That's also been happening unjustly for decades. This is not an isolated situation. White cop on black suspect. It happens to all races all the time. Hence the reason you hear all lives matter being chanted a lot. Because although I agree, black lives do matter, we can't forget the fact that other lives matter. We can't forget the fact that black suspects have also killed white cops. Their lives did matter also. So Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, AOC, they're all hiding behind razor wire fences. Nobody can get to them. The very people who promoted the violence all summer long, the very people who encouraged it and applauded it and funded it and bailed criminals out over it are all protected by Secret Service and bodyguards and the entire National Guard. They can care less what happens in Minneapolis. It's selfish, it's disgusting, and it just goes to show the mentality of the Democrats. That's all they care about. Trump wouldn't allow this. He'd have the freaking army on the ground right now. He wouldn't give a shit. He would have everybody there right now getting ready to protect Minneapolis. And if the governor turned him away, he probably wouldn't care at this point. He'd pull rank and he'd unleash an army to maintain law and order on the ground in Minneapolis. We are about to see that city being burnt down, and there isn't going to be a single National Guard around to stop it. They're going to give them carte blanche to do whatever they want because that's what they did all last summer long. So why wouldn't they do it now? So we've got a big issue on our hands. The judge in the George Floyd case has reinstated third-degree murder charge. It was off the table. Now it's on the table. Another big mistake that they've made is that they are making the jurors' names public. So now we have a situation where jurors are scared to death of trying this case fairly because if they vote for an acquittal, their lives or their family lives are in danger because Black Lives Matter are waiting in the alleyways threatening the legal system that if we don't get what we want, get ready for the next round of riots. So America is in big trouble. Here says there will be riots regardless. Have to distract the public from what's going on in D.C. Again, a ton. I mean, it's never ending in D.C. I mean, look at what's going on here in New York State with Cuomo. We've got Cuomo, who is responsible for the deaths of thousands of nursing home patients. And now we all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have these sexual harassment charges now being brought against him. Which, listen, if these women were sexually harassed, yes, they need to be heard. But all of a sudden, we've completely disregarded and dropped the nursing home case. I mean, you don't even hear it being covered in the media anymore. And the same thing's going on in D.C. We've got a border crisis, which the Biden administration continues to deny. They refuse to call it a crisis. Even after Obama called his crisis, his border situation, when 1,000 illegal border crossings occurred a day, he called it a crisis. Joe Biden has nearly 5,000 illegal border crossings a day and refuses to call it a crisis. Fine, Joe, what is it? So we've got a record-breaking illegal border crossing crisis down at the southern border right now. We've got Cuomo responsible for killing thousands. We have Democratic governors all over the United States responsible for bankrupting their states, destroying the lives of students who have been kept out of school. Look at in California. They have been masked up and locked down for a year now. And we're trying to distract all of that now with this case. And again, they're using Black Lives Matter as their pawns, their little chess pieces, to now distract the rest of the world from what we're really supposed to be focusing on. Not this George Floyd nonsense. The guy was a criminal. He had a rap sheet a mile long. He was restrained after he resisted and he overdosed. Case closed. Like there's nothing else to discuss about. I don't even need to be a freaking lawyer to know that he should get off. If justice truly prevails here, George Floyd will 100% get off. But the Democrats are using Black Lives Matter as pawns to put pressure on Minneapolis and the lawyers and the judges, and are threatening them that if they don't get the verdict that they want, that the city's going to suffer a great deal of damage. Lives will be lost. Buildings will be once again burnt to the ground. Hundreds of millions of dollars will be lost here if George Floyd or Derek Chauvin is acquitted. So that's what the Democrats want right now. They just want to distract us once again. Wanda says, even if the man is found not to be at fault, and I'm not saying he wasn't, then there will be riots. We need our police and our National Guard and our military to step in and put a stop to it before it ever starts. This craziness has gone on long enough. We can't take the law into our own hands. I worked in the court system for over 22 years, and one of the first things I learned was that things are not always as they seem. From what we saw from a video, this police officer is guilty, but let's wait and hear the whole story. See, that's what I don't agree with. Why are you making it? What's he guilty of, Wanda? Just because you worked in the court system doesn't mean you know the law inside out. And I don't know the law inside out either. All I know is that the procedure allowed Derek Chauvin to kneel on the neck. And I know that the same people who stormed Breonna Taylor's house shot in self-defense. And I know that the cops in Rochester, New York, who dealt with the Daniel situation, Daniel Prude, I know that they restrained him and put a bag over his head because he was spitting all over everybody. And again, the media failed to tell you that. Daniel Prude had a bag over his head because he was spitting at all the cops. So they put a bag over his head because they didn't want to be spat on. But the media forgot to leave that out. And he died of an overdose in the cold, yes. Maybe they should have tried to put a blanket on him. But when you're spat on and treated like dirt, don't expect the police to want to wrap you up in a comfy, cozy sleeping bag for the few minutes that you're left out in the cold. Have some respect if you want respect back. That's how it works, especially in law enforcement. To these men and women who risk their lives every single day for us. Debbie says they should try this case on Rikers Island. I highly doubt any of those street bashing criminals would show up there to cause trouble. I assume Rikers Island is a very vicious place. And yeah, maybe they should have this case where there's people around with an incredible amount of guns who are able to defend themselves in case it does get to that point. I'd like to see Black Lives Matter go to some of these rural communities where some of these very wonderful law-abiding systems have a vault of weapons, ranging from everything from handguns to automatic assault rifles. I'd like to see them go start marching through those rural areas of America and try their BLM violent rioting BS against the likes of some of the most hardcore American patriots you'll probably ever come across. Chris says they are going to riot either way. Just another reason to destroy everything in their path and steal everything they can get their hands on. It's very sad that we are going to see riots either way. It's very sad that we have to sacrifice justice because we're now up against an angry mob who are going to cry and throw their toys out the window if they don't get their way, because that's what they've done all summer long, and you better believe that's exactly what they're going to do again. So we have a very dangerous situation on our hands. According to Newsmax, Dave Rubin says unless there is a full conviction in the Derek Chauvin case, there is going to be massive riots. They've already called it on. They are threatening the legal system. Unless there's a full conviction, get ready for massive riots. The judge reinstating third-degree murder charge and now making the jurors' names public are the two most horrific mistakes that they could have made down there on the ground in Minneapolis. So the next few days are going to be very, very touch and go for residents of Minneapolis. I can only pray that they're able to seek shelter. Get out if you can, guys, because the BLM mob, they're coming for you. And they are not going to rest until they bring every single last building down to the ground, because that is what they do. And we're not going to see Kamala Harris bail them out this time. We're not going to see Pelosi. We're not going to see AOC, because all of them are in their comfy little White House palace, hiding behind fences and razor wire. So we'll be following this story very closely. Let's pray for everybody on the ground there. They're going to definitely need it. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today at You Made It Political. We are live every day, streaming to Facebook and YouTube at 3 o'clock. We also stream to Amazon Music, Spotify, iTunes, and TuneIn. You guys have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.